Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining me yet again. We're just going to give everyone a couple of minutes, as we always do when we do these webinar sessions. But I hope you are all full of your Christmas dinner, and you've kind of got over the Christmas hump. You're all really excited to be back to work and spend an hour or so with me talking about some of the things that we expect to see over the next 12 months. So before we get underway, just a couple of things. Obviously, as always, if you've got any questions, feel free to fire them into the chat on the right hand side. I can't see them whilst I'm going through this, but we will have a Q&A bit at the end where I will try and run through some of those questions and answer whatever I can. And also, as you know, a lot of you are a customer of TaylorMade. You know, you can reach out to me directly if you want to have a chat about anything. So we're going to give everybody a minute or two. I'm going to wait for Sam over here, who's always hides and never gets any glory. But I'll wait for Sam to give me a nod that we're all right to move on. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, cool. So, right, top trends then. So, what's the purpose of today's session? Really, it's all about kind of me giving you my idea of what I think is going to happen in the next 12 months, and probably a little bit further than that. In all truth, I can't. This isn't a fixed thing. It's very much my opinion. And the opinion of those people, some of my colleagues that work around me. There's going to be some really obvious ones. I'm not giving too many secrets away when I suggest that we're going to be talking about AI at some point today, right? And what's going to happen in the next few months with artificial intelligence. But we're also going to touch on a few other bits like automation, probably the second fastest trend in the technology sector at the moment. Cybersecurity is also up there in the top 5. It's obviously has been number 1 until AI turned up. Microsoft's relentless takeover and kind of ability to create platforms and products and services in the space that we operate in, and what they're kind of looking at doing and some of their products and services. We are obviously going to recap over some of the webinars we did last year. So hopefully you join me for some of those. And this might be a bit of a refresher very, very quickly on some of that stuff. The telecoms industry gets forgotten a little bit now and then, you know, in terms of what we're doing and how it's innovating and how it's changing. So we'll chat about that a little bit. And then at the end of this, I want to just kind of talk about some of the myths, some of these big buzzwords that have been floating around for quite a while, and give you a bit of an idea of where they are in their technology journey and whether or not they're still relevant today. So, as you know, buzzword doesn't always mean it's going to happen, and in some cases it hasn't quite happened the way perhaps technology or perhaps the industry predicted. So let's get going with AI then. What I wanted to do with this bit really is just for those of you, we've done seminars and webinars before. We've talked about AI lots and lots. Obviously, I do a lot in my role as CTO here. My job really is to kind of get you to understand where we were and where we're going. And today I want to start just very, very quickly with where we were. What is AI? Okay, as fundamentally, AI has actually been around for an awful long time, and it was actually invented, or the technology required to create kind of neural networks and to create these large language models that we use today. That idea and the concept has been there for a long, long time. In fact, before I was born. So, but we've never had the computing power, the resources, and the ability to compute that level of data, nor the level of data digitally for it to ingest. And today we're at a point where we can achieve that. So actually, when we talk about AI and what it was like maybe 5-10 years ago, we were interacting with it. So probably the most common way was every time you found your broadband provider, you found your mobile phone provider or utility service, you went to a website, I should say, you probably ended up in a kind of a live chat bot, right? And you weren't probably talking to a human being, in all honesty. You were talking to a bot. The issue with those bots is that they were only able to respond to questions you asked based on what they've been pre-programmed with. So these pre-programmed instructions, that basically meant that it was hard coded into the system to say, if the customer asks this question, respond with this answer, and if they ask this question, respond with this answer. That never worked very well. People got really frustrated. That sort of evolved and changed into a list of questions you can ask, and then it would reply, and then it gave you a list of other questions you can ask. And it never really worked, right? So everyone just got annoyed and picked the phone up and spoke to somebody. So, but AI as a whole has actually been there for a long time, right? That's probably our inception as consumers, maybe, to the world of AI. But behind the scenes, lots of stuff was going on. I remember as a young boy, I wasn't that young in 1997, to be fair, but I was just about becoming an adult and realizing kind of what was going on in the world. And an AI model beat the world chess champion back in 1997. And what happened is everyone went, "Wow, AI is amazing! It's going to change the world! It's incredible!" And we're all going to have robots walking around by the year 2010. We're going to be flying in flying cars, and you get all this buzz. And that's a really important word, right? When we talk about AI, there is a lot of buzz going on around AI at the moment. But we also have had these absolute winters of where everyone thought AI was going to take over the world at the turn of the century, and then it went really, really quiet. We had this AI winter, okay, and that's happened a number of times through my technical career, anyway. So this might be another blip. I genuinely believe that actually this is probably the most influential AI change in terms of this large language modeling stuff that we're talking about, the chat GPTs that have the power to really disrupt the industry, and they will. And there's not really anything any of us are going to do about it. Okay, it will come and it will disrupt and it will change the way we work. Even if we don't want it, it will just appear inside the software that we use. Very much like Microsoft has a habit of doing it. They have a new thing and a new feature. It will just turn up in your toolbar. Okay, you don't need to go and buy it again. Eventually, this stuff will just be free and baked into what you're doing. But obviously, in the world of healthcare many years ago as well, we were using AI to actually predict and as we say in there, diagnose bacterial infections back in the 1970s. So it's actually been there a long time, and using that really comes from the idea of using computers to crack hard problems. So where are we today? Now, I would hope that most people on the call probably are aware of what ChatGPT is, whether you've used it or not. There may be people on the call that have used it and have used it in a work capacity. And obviously, if you've joined any of my previous webinars, hopefully you're aware that there's a lot of things that we need to think about when we start lifting data out of our environment and pasting it into things like ChatGPT, because they're hosted in another country for a start, because the data that you're pasting in, the AI models are learning from. You might be pasting confidential information. You might be posting, key secrets within your business, and you're putting it out there on the internet. So there's a lot of concerns around that, but it's an incredibly powerful tool. It's amazing at creating language, at reading text, okay, digesting vast amounts of data and helping me pinpoint the bit of information I need. It has the ability to save us an inordinate amount of time. So look, I'm a big fan of AI, but I'm also a realist when it comes to it. One of the things that I would say AI is going to be brilliant at, for those of you in the healthcare sector, I know you're already kind of being challenged with AI bits and pieces from various departments within the healthcare sector. When it comes to things like scanning and looking at images, okay, the way a model works, these AI systems work, is they train. So you have to give them a huge amount of data to be able to determine an answer. So one of the things that we're seeing happening in the healthcare sector is this idea of scanning and reading in scanned information. So maybe X-rays, right? We're taking pictures of X-rays. If you feed an AI engine thousands and thousands and thousands of X-rays, eventually it's able to determine where a broken bone is. Now it can do that not because it's kind of able to work out that's a bone. It breaks it down to pure computational points where ones and zeros with different colors in a picture, and it's able to identify. Once it's read thousands and thousands and thousands, it kind of ranks it and it says, I'm 7% sure that little grey line in that bone is a broken bone, let's say. That's so much more reliable than a human being. Okay, a human being has definitely not seen hundreds of thousands of X-rays. Therefore, they don't have the width or the bandwidth of seeing every little slight deviation of something that goes a bit wrong. They're also potentially able to miss things because they're human, and an AI model is less likely to do that. Doesn't mean it won't, but it is less likely to miss minor detail. So huge improvements in terms of certain tasks within certain industries. AI could change the world massively. Obviously, we've also got voice assistants. Now, I'd imagine a lot of you have got an Alexa at home, some sort of Google Home device, whatever, where you're talking to it. And that's another great example of that kind of AI buzz and AI winter. I imagine you went and bought your Alexa and for the first week or two, you were asking it questions. What's the weather outside? You were asking questions for the sake of asking it questions, right? You were asking it to play you songs, and you were asking it what the weather was going to be tomorrow, and how do I cook a poached egg. You know how to do that, but it's cool. Let's ask a question and get a response. But actually, if you've had it a year and a half, I bet you haven't really even asked it a question in the last year and a half, right? And that's because you get used to this stuff, right? And it just becomes the norm. It's there when we need it, but actually, it's not front and center of our life. It's not changing our world. And this is the important thing to remember with AI. So we're at a point today where AI has the potential to do amazing things. So what does that mean as a business owner, as a senior manager in an organization? This is a key bit of information, actually. So 55% of businesses in the UK, this is, plan to deploy some sort of AI into their business in the next 12 months. Now, that's actually quite a big stat. It's so much bigger than I thought it was going to be, in all honesty, right? And what that's telling me is not necessarily that they want AI, but they definitely want the outcomes of AI. They're definitely looking for that streamline, that process approach, that ability to bring someone into the business that can do things, but because it's an AI model, I don't need to pay them anything potentially. Maybe that's one of the reasons. Another reason might be just that it's able to observe what we do as a business and make improvements or make suggestions and make changes. It's going to standardize how we speak, our language that we portray to the outside world. And therefore, we're going to get our quality, our level of quality is going to increase because actually it's always being produced to the same standard potentially. So there's lots of things that we can do. But how do we actually take AI and implement that into a real world scenario that we use within our businesses? And it's worth saying, if you want to know more about AI in more detail, we're not going to go into huge detail today, but I've done webinars and talks on this stuff before. So go to our website, go and have a look, because, I think we've got one coming up soon anyway, around AI again. All right, key topic, we want to talk about it. But what does the future look like? Well, obviously, we've been using ChatGPT. Hopefully, you're aware there's a technology called Copilot, which is there from Microsoft, if you're a Microsoft user. Copilot is absolutely revolutionizing what I do. I use it day to day. It's fantastic. The ability for me to sit in a meeting and have Copilot minute my meeting for me has changed my life. Right? Genuinely, changed my life. I don't sit there having to worry about actions. I ask it at the end of a meeting to list out all the actions, and wherever somebody sat in a meeting and said, Scott, can you do that, or can you speak to this person, or can you do that by Tuesday, it creates that action and puts it in my diary. Right? It gives me a task in my tasks list. It's awesome. I love it. It helps me write vast ways of text where I need to do that. If I'm honest, most of the time, it's more of a starter for 10 than it is actually what I want to say. But actually, it gets me going. It gets my mind going. It kind of lets me think about things, and it's a huge improvement. So there's a whole bunch of stuff inside Copilot that allows me to speed up what I'm doing, and that means that I can produce more as an individual, which means that I'm more productive and I'm earning the business more money than I can do just on my own. But we're not necessarily having to pay a salary for someone to be my assistant. And there's a reason it's called Copilot, because I'm the pilot, right? It doesn't do everything I need it to do. It doesn't stand up here and do a webinar. Okay, it hasn't got hands. It can't physically go and do anything. But it can help me get organized. It can help me be faster. It can help me be more efficient. It can help my level of quality improve in terms of my output. So that is worth money, in my opinion, right? To give you an idea, it was hundreds of pounds a year. It's now kind of the cost of a cup of coffee every week to have that assistant. It's useful, right? So it's worth looking at. We've also got other things out there like, we've all wanted to see self-driving cars. We've wanted to see flying cars. We've wanted to see all that stuff. Now, whilst we're not really seeing loads of that in Europe, that is obviously happening in other parts of the world. We've got cars driving around. Maybe not flying cars, but we've got cars driving around on their own. We've got deliveries being delivered by some of the big, Amazons and the big providers, the big blue chips that are being delivered by drone, where there's some AI intelligence required in that. But obviously that does, in some sectors, again, in certain industries, that does come into play at the in the SME level. If you are at a point where you've run a big warehouse or you've got lots of goods in stock, then obviously it's important to look at how you move that stock around and doing that autonomously and making decisions. You don't if you just need to move box A to box B and do it repetitively, you don't need an AI engine. You need automation, right? If you need task A to always end up as task B, there's no thinking required there. As a rule, it's a law. You've got to go from here to here. If the environment changes or anything in that mix changes, that's when AI comes in and it helps you make a decision. It ranks it, give it a set of boundaries, and it ranks its decision. And if it decides that 7 out of 10 means that I should do this thing, it may well go and do that thing. But if you don't need it, you just use automation. But in a small world, you might find that, vehicle automation is key and is important. You need to move stock around and you use drones to do that. Sounds very far-fetched, but I actually know a number of SMEs that are exploring this stuff. But all of this, excuse me, comes back to the fact that we have some risks to consider before AI happens. AI is happening, all right? And that's really important. It is happening. There is nothing that you're going to do to stop it from happening. It is going to be on your desktop. There are going to be AI tools there in the next 12 months. Whether you buy them or not, okay, lots of platforms, you've got hosted finance systems and et cetera, and SaaS applications that you buy into. Those platforms are trying to compete to be better than everyone else, and therefore they're grabbing the AI kind of bell and saying, we've got an AI functionality and we're just going to bake it into our system and you're going to get it for what you're getting it today. So you're going to have AI. Now, this means that you need to start thinking about something right now, okay? Because if this is going to be forced on you, then you need to make sure you're getting prepared and ready for it. There's a few examples of risks that I want to talk about. If you've seen me speak before, I've been through these before, but just really, really quickly. The idea of sharing confidential information. What we've got there, excuse me, is imagine you've had an FD. The FD left, I don't know, 3 years ago, but 5 years ago, they saved a copy of your management accounts in a folder system, 5 or 6 folders deep. The chances are that a junior member of staff isn't going to stumble across that file. But let's say the FD accidentally dragged and dropped it into the public share that everyone's got access to. That junior is very unlikely to go and surf through all those folders and find the management accounts. But if Copilot has access to that file, and that junior member of staff has access to that file through permissioning, and that junior member of staff asks a question like, what's the company's overheads? It's just going to go and grab that information out of that file and serve it up, because that junior member of staff is allowed to see that file, so therefore they're allowed to have this answer. So we need to do a bit of an audit and understand where all our data is, right? We've also got the risk of using out-of-date information. So you've got a product, you've got a service, you've got something that you've delivered over a number of years. Okay, 10 years ago you had your product, and every year it evolved. There was a change. You brought new things to it. You removed some things from it. If you ask your AI agent today to tell you about your product, how does it know to always look at the latest one? Might do, but the chances are it might also look at all the other data sheets and collateral that you've had about the product as it was when you sold it 9 years ago, and you decommissioned a certain functionality or you stopped delivering a certain service. Problem is, it's not going to know that, and it could well respond to a customer saying, oh yeah, we do that service, because there's a file from 8 years ago that says you do it, and therefore it's as black and white as that. So we need to look at archiving and removing our data and getting rid of it, okay? Infringing copyright, another key one. Make sure you're getting rid of any of your competitive sales collateral, or at least hiding it from AI tools like Copilot. The reason for that is that, if you ask it to create you a data sheet on your product, if there's 10 other data sheets from your competitors in your system, it's just going to start to rip content and words out of those other data sheets. It may even take a whole passage of text, put it on your slide. You're like kind of may well be unlikely to recognize that that's come from one of your competitors. You publish that sort of across the country, planet, whatever your market is, and suddenly you've got yourself in a bit of a copyright battle with a competitor. So you need to make sure you're removing your competitive information and labeling it and removing it in some way. Prompts of misinformation. This is something that's a bit hard to understand, but if I'm having a conversation with an AI engine and I say to it, the sky is green, but tell me about the sky, it'll come back and say, the sky is green. And it will just take my word for it, okay? I can misinform AI very, very easily. But the problem is that then I'm going to assume that what it tells me is right. Well, not necessarily. So all of this, everything that AI creates should never be taken on face value. It should always be fact checked. Should always be ensuring that it's correct. So you can definitely lead it up the garden path, is what I'm saying. You can make it think the world is a weird place if you really want to. And then misrepresenting your organization is probably another key one. It's naturally AI has a bit of a bias in it. The reason it's biased is because it's trained on all of the information humanity's ever created. That's what ChatGPT is trained on. And when I say ever, what I mean is everything that's on the internet. Okay, the internet houses almost everything that we've ever created, apart from stuff that's behind closed doors in certain businesses and organisations and educational establishments, things like that. So, but it's got a pretty good understanding of the world as we know it, and therefore it's biased because humans are biased, and humans have always been a bit biased about certain things. So, an example of that, and this not to cause offence, but you might ask it, tell me a bit of information about a teacher, and it will come back and say, Mrs. Brown. I'm not saying it will, but it may. Okay. The reason it's coming back and saying Mrs. rather than Mr. We live in a world now where that's a pretty equal split in the education sector, right? We've got as many males and females in the teaching profession, but it will probably say Mrs. because historically that role may have been more have more women in it, right? Same with like nursing and things like that. So that isn't the case today, but obviously could have been back in the day. So it's trained on that information. Most of its information talks about teachers being female, and therefore it thinks most teachers are female. That isn't the case. So, of course, if you write that and you put it out there, you might get somebody kick back and go, well, why have you said Mrs.? Like, there's just as many male teachers and da. So you can misrepresent your organisation quite easily. So how do you get around these things? There's a few actions that I want to take away. Staff training. If you're going to have these AI engines popping up all over your platforms and different bits of software, you need to start teaching your staff how to use it, how to ask the right question, how to be aware of those risks that we've just gone through, and how to make sure that we're protecting themselves and the business from the risks of making a mistake there. Data governance is all about looking at your data, locking your data down, controlling your data, making sure that you've got access to certain bits of information and that the AI engine can't see it, and therefore we can't be in infringement of copyright and we can't be infringement of out-of-date information, etc., etc. And the last thing I want to talk about is models, right? Today, we're talking about Copilot, we're talking about ChatGPT. This allows us to take human text, ask it questions, and it replies to us in a load of human text, okay? But there are loads of other things out there, other models and systems that do things. They may look at our security system. They might look at kind of some of the data science factions. They might be drawing us pictures because we're in a marketing capacity. They might be creating us flyers, whatever. These models are not all just ChatGPT. All right, you may have heard of something called DALL-E, which draws pictures, for example. So, so these things are very, very different. Now, you wouldn't go out there today. Well, maybe you do in some capacity, but if you're in Microsoft, you're generally using Microsoft, right? You probably don't get your email from Microsoft and Google. In fact, if you do, I don't really know how you're doing that. But the point is, you don't kind of your system, your business systems, and how you run as a process requires probably certain types of information, certain types of systems, certain types of software you use. If you go out there and start using all these different models from all over the place, because this one's slightly better than this one at drawing a picture, then your data is going to become more disparate and more dispersed and be all over the place. And you've got no idea what's going on. And this is probably one of the advantages of things like Copilot and of the Microsoft suite, if I'm honest. So Microsoft have lots and lots and lots of these different, what we call GPTs, what we call Copilots in their language. But we've got the Microsoft, just Copilots on its own. It's just called Copilot. And that's baked into the Edge browser, Windows web browser. It's baked into Windows itself. So if Windows is up to date and this function is turned on, you'll be able to ask Copilot questions inside Windows. It can automate your computer and all sorts of things. We've then got it baked into our 365 environment. It's worth saying that Copilot, so I'd go back, just reads everything on the internet. Go over to 365 Copilot, it can now read everything on the internet and everything you store inside your environment. So it starts to understand your business and who you are and who the staff are and what areas they work in and what files they create and all this sort of stuff and what your products and services are, and it can reply to your customers and this sort of stuff. We can then go a bit further and look at data analytics and it can control, we can have AI engines analyzing data within your business and understanding how to make decisions and key bits of information to help streamline and optimize, etc., etc. We've got role-specific Copilots. These are things that use Dynamics in the Microsoft world, but these exist for things like Salesforce. But But sales co-pilots, what that's doing there is saying, I'm going to look at your system and we're going to interrogate your sales process, right? We're going to understand whether or not your pitch is right. Okay, we're going to understand when you create a sales order, right? I can create you a sales order. Fine, just like key some information in and Copilot will create your sales order, etc., etc. So we won't hang on these, but there's lots and lots of different ones, right? If you're a developer, you've probably looked at the GitHub one. So loads and loads of different models, loads and loads of different things. It isn't sadly as simple as just saying, let's turn Copilot on. Copilot's got lots and lots of arms and legs. So that's AI, right? I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I know that I love talking about it, but let's move on to the next biggest thing that I think we're going to be seeing. Now, automation is a slightly different thing to AI, right? We're talking about, you know what I'm saying? We move A to B. If it's got set rules and set boundaries, you don't need AI. And I very often get asked, can I have a chat about AI because I want to streamline my business? And I said, well, actually, you don't necessarily need AI to do that. You know what your business process looks like. You know where the boundaries are. You know what the tolerances for failure are. Therefore, you can kind of work out what you need. You just need to do it faster, maybe. So automation for efficiency is a key thing. We live in a climate now where we've got more, certainly with the political changes that we've had in the last year or two, we're now in a situation where we've had a certain level of uncertainty. We've got bigger tax bills, which I'm sure many of you can relate to. But as a result of that, many businesses are looking at, how do I save money? Right, and that's the truth. How do I improve efficiency so I can drive up revenue without having to cut costs? So, and one way to drive up revenue, or one way to streamline, or and save yourself cost is to do that. Is to streamline, right? So workflow, looking at every process in your business and saying, well, how long does it take to do something? Can we do it better? Can we do it more intelligently? Can we do it faster? Can we work smarter? Is definitely a good approach. Integration between lots of platforms. If you've got people that are taking data out of one system, sitting there in Excel and churning data to then import it maybe into the finance system so that you can send out invoices, well, that's a pretty inefficient use of someone's time in a world where we've got AI engines talking to us, right? But we're still sitting here taking data out and keying it into a spreadsheet. We can definitely solve that. We can definitely speed that up, right? It's probably a very expensive process in your business if that's happening. And then we've got this idea of hyper automation, right? And what that means is combining that idea of automation where processes happen and we're making that happen automatically with the idea of things change and therefore let's bake some AI in there so that it can make a decision about a change in a process and potentially stop an issue. We use that sort of technology here to identify issues out of hours and faults and bits and pieces like that. How important is it? There isn't necessarily a human being that needs to look at that first. We can triage information and triage customer issues using AI to determine how important it is before it gets escalated up our tree. And obviously we've got the idea of machine learning. Machine learning is about sending lots of data in. You're talking about those scans earlier, thousands and thousands of documents, and eventually it works out what the differences are and how to identify things. So machine learning is key. Just to go back actually on that one, automation. So we have got a webinar coming up on automation. So, sorry, not coming up, apologies, it's on the website already. If you go and scan that QR code, it will take you to that one, all right? So everything I want to talk about now, if you want to know more detail about automation, go and have a look at that webinar on the website. So just whilst I waffle slightly, this is a little video from an automation piece that we did back in that demo, okay? And what we're looking to try and achieve in this video was to streamline a process, to speed something up. And what we did is we kind of decided that we wanted a system that replied to a customer email. A customer's going to send a really grumpy email in, get really upset with us, and we want to be able to reply. Now, there's two pieces to this. One is we need something to happen when a customer sends an email in. We need it to send them a response. Now, that's automation. And it might be that if they sent an email into complaints at whatever, that we might behave and treat that email slightly different than if they sent an email into info at or sales at, right? If the email's coming in to complaints at, we probably need to act on that really quickly and we need to get all over it. It probably needs to be escalated pretty quickly. So it might be that we need a set of rules that say, send these emails to certain people. but I also want to track and log that complaint so that I can build up my knowledge base of issues so that I can use that as material to teach and learn from, and for the rest of the organization to understand kind of a lessons learned approach. But also, I might not want to sit there reading the email, taking everything out, and putting it all into a file. Maybe I can use AI to kind of understand the meaning of the email. And again, if the email comes in, one of the things that you can do inside, this is Power Automate, by the way, that you're looking at on the screen at the moment. One of the things it can do is read the sentiment of an email. So it can say, hey, this email came in and this customer's really happy. Great. This email's come in, this customer's really upset, really angry. You can tell by the tone of the email. Well, maybe that email needs to come straight to a senior manager or to a director or whatever it looks like. So AI can be used alongside automation, but AI isn't the thing that's driving the changes in your business and driving an email to go here and then something else to go there. It might be that you're writing data into spreadsheets. It might be all sorts of things. But AI has an ability to enhance automation. It's not automation itself. Another key thing that just to point out, automation allows us to do very simple things like routing emails around. It can be done at an employee level. So you can log into Power Automate and create your own flows. This is very drag and drop, as you can see here. We're clicking on little boxes and we're adding functions in. The idea of what we're doing there is I hit add and it says, what do you want to add? I want to add a trigger. That's a trigger is when I save a file, when I send an email, when I do something. And then you have a little line to another box that says, well, what do you want to do now then once you've done that? And it says, I want to send an email. I want to save a different file. I want to put it in SharePoint. I want it to save it in my Teams chat. I need it to send me a text. I need it to do email a customer, whatever. It might be create a spreadsheet, take this data, turn it into this data, save it in a spreadsheet, and import it into the finance system. That might be another step on. It can also integrate into APIs. So if you've got SaaS-based applications, your finance system's online using something like Xero maybe, then you can grab data out of a spreadsheet and run it on a routine every night. So it just goes and pushes your data up into the cloud and no human being needs to be involved there. So this Power Automate is an incredibly powerful tool. Again, it's one of these products that to some extent is free for you to use. It's baked into your Office 365 licensing. And if you want to get any further than that, then and do some really, really clever stuff, you will have to pay some money for it. But as it stands at the moment, a lot of the functionality, anything within the 365 bubble, you do for free within that, and you're already paying for it. So if you are paying for it and you're not using it, and you're looking to save yourself money and streamline your business operation, there is a conversation to be had about looking at Power Automate and automation. So that's great if you're a user trying to create changes within your flow, within your work life, within your business, and speed yourself up. But how do you identify where you need to improve a process at a whole business level? So if you're on the call and you're a business owner, how do you know where, let's say, I'm going to take an example, your goods in process. How do you know that's running efficiently? So you might be able to measure that. I don't know. I'm going to assume that it's one of those things that you just assume happens and it's all fine. But actually, without you going down and really getting involved in the goods in process and finding out all the steps that go through it, I imagine whoever in your business is responsible for goods in understands the process. I imagine their manager understands the process, but probably not as well as the person that does it. I imagine the director or the owner of the business probably isn't that fast. It's happening. There don't seem to be loads of issues. I'm probably not going to focus on it. But actually, is there an opportunity in there when you're sitting there at a business level, at a board level, saying, how do we streamline the business? How do we speed things up? How do we get more efficient? How do you know that process needs improving? Or are you just taking for granted that it's okay? Well, there is a concept called process mining. In the world of IT, anything that you do, when you save a document, when you open a file, when you log into a system, it creates a log and it stores that information. It says Scott logged in at this time, he created this document at this time, that document was stored in this location, etc., etc. What that allows us to do is, as you log into all these different platforms and people use technology across your business, you can create a picture of things that happen in your business and how they link to each other. And this is called process mining. So this view, again, this is within Power Automate. This little tree thing on the left-hand side there is an example of a process within the business. I'm going to go a little bit closer. But this is a process within the business. Now you can see that these numbers next to these little kind of these little circular numbers show how many times an event happens, how many times did an invoice get approved, and in this example, 65, right? 65 invoices have been measured during this process mining experiment. And what it's able to determine is once an invoice gets approved, the next step, that information gets sent somewhere or it gets stored somewhere, and then there's another action that kind of references it or touches it, and that is a process which is the creation of a credit. Okay, and that happens 65 times as well. You'd expect it to happen 65 times, right? But if it went wrong, that would work out that there was one instance where something went wrong and it went over here and something weird happened with it. So it's a great way of you working out how efficient are you? How streamlined are you? Because actually, if you've got things going all over the place, then there's an argument to say somebody doesn't know the process there, right? You need to go and make sure they do. But a key thing is it can also measure the time. If it takes 10 minutes to approve an invoice and 6 days to approve a credit, then you might be, what will happen in this diagram is that credit memo would go red. You'd set some operational targets around the time that's acceptable for each of these stages of the process. And when it goes a bit further than that, you can say, hang on a minute, we need to look at that because that's taking far too long to get a credit out, okay? And then you can go in and work out what's happening within that process. So at your position in the business, if you're a business owner, you probably don't have a clear picture of what's going on in the nuts and bolts and the weeds of every part of your business. But this idea of process mining is something that's key, that we're having more and more conversations about at the moment with customers. And I see that growing this year as people are trying to save money, cut costs, and improve their efficiency. This is a great way to achieve that. Okay. So next one, cybersecurity. Let's just go through that past conversation again. Let's say back in the 90s, all right, 80s and 90s, there wasn't a lot of cybersecurity going on. Let's be just totally honest about it. We were largely kind of building machines and systems and bits and pieces, and then putting them online. And no one really was thinking about cybersecurity. There wasn't a great cybersecurity threat. It's always been there, of course, but it wasn't being taken seriously. Okay, we had antivirus. I get that, but we know that that's defunct nowadays, and it isn't up to scratch. We had firewalls that got invented in the 1990s. You know, they haven't been around since the inception of IT. And cryptography, the idea of SSL certificates. What I mean by that is when you go to a website and it says it's not secure, that's cryptography. That's SSL certificates. You know, and they were actually invented in the 70s. They've been around for ages, but they've never really changed. The same technology that's in use today, but it was all relatively simple. Okay, today we are in a much more complex environment where we are constantly under threat of ransomware attacks, where they're going to come in and kind of encrypt our data and ransom us for cryptocurrency and things like that to get money back, or threatening to release our data onto the internet. So this is happening all the time. You read about it all the time. It's happening all over the world, and it's not dying down, is the truth, right? And the reason for that is because, sadly, 91% of all incidents that involve cybercrime come from somebody clicking on an email. That hasn't changed. That stat was the same stat last year. So even though we're doing more and more phishing awareness, that isn't going down. People are still clicking on links on their emails, and we're not defending it, or we're not getting rid of it, I should say. So that tells you straight away one action. If you haven't got phishing awareness training, if you're not training your staff, there's not a lot we can do from a tech. There are things we can do, but the best way to stop people from getting in and abusing your system is just to teach your staff not to do certain things. And I appreciate we're all human. That's never going to be 100% efficient, but it is the best line of defense. It needs to be supported with a whole bunch of other stuff, but it's the first place to go. And you do that through training your staff and sending them a simulated email that has a link on it. And if they click on it, then you put them into training. Don't tell them, don't tell the whole office, don't turn it into a game. People will feel intimidated by that. But you just send them very privately, send them a link and say, hey, could you go and do this training, please? Right? Zero trust security is a big thing at the moment, right? Back in the 90s, we were like, yeah, we're just going to put it online, and if someone hits it, we'll lock it down, right? If someone attacks it, we'll work out and we'll shut stuff down, we'll keep it safe. Totally the other way around nowadays. Everything we do is zero trust. It means we lock everything down first, and we only open up the things that we need to open up for a functional service to work. That's why if you're in 365, you will have been forced to use MFA now. Microsoft just said, no, they're all using MFA. You're going to have to deal with it. I appreciate it's a bit annoying, but from a security perspective, we need to do this. And that's why we're at that level now. AI is obviously getting involved in things like EDR and XDR technology, allowing us to kind of react to viruses. So EDR's the standard de facto for what antivirus is nowadays, right? If you're running Norton antivirus or Bitdefender or something like that, then that needs to be moved up to EDR. Okay, it's not good enough to have just a standard antivirus. My opinion, anyway. It's not good enough to have just a standard antivirus product. It leaves you at risk of kind of zero-day threats. EDR platforms don't as much. And XDR is all about, if you haven't heard the term XDR, it's about looking at things that are going on in the cloud platforms you use, all right, as well as your firewalls. It's extended beyond just the endpoint. So we're looking at firewalls and networking equipment and cloud services and all those bits and pieces that perhaps we haven't got visibility of today if you've just got antivirus. But we're looking for weird behavior. We're looking for strange things going on. That's what these products do, right? And they go, that's weird, I'm going to shut that down. So that actually, using AI, we're able to look at thousands and millions of different transactions that are going on all over the place and determine those ones that are high risk and just shut them down. So very important. And this idea of Microsoft putting MFA out everywhere is because they are getting hammered by cybersecurity issues and people trying to hack into Microsoft and get to your data. They've got your data in their system and they're trying to protect you. All right, there's a certain amount of your obligation to protect yourself as well. But they are under constant attack, DDoS threats, all these things that are happening in the cloud space. All right? So what does it look like in the future? To be really, really quick, there are lots of things going on with cybersecurity. Just something to call out, this SSL thing, you might have heard that the day quantum computers arrive, then SSL certificates and everything's going to be, there will never be a safe password ever again. That is actually true, weirdly enough. So the day a quantum computer is actually kind of available at a consumer level, it will be able to crack an SSL certificate in a matter of milliseconds. So we need to get to a point where we're actually creating quantum resistant encryption is the next terminology. That is happening. Be aware of it. It will come at some point in the future. But to set your mind at rest, no one's got that power quite yet, apart from governments. Autonomous security systems kind of goes a little bit further than what I was saying a minute ago with EDR and XDR and AI. This is just enhancing that, using AI technology to a much better level to neutralize and effectively detect and analyze threats and try and shut them down as quickly as possible. That's going to happen more and more this year. You're going to see big advancements in your cybersecurity software. Cybersecurity as a service. More and more people are taking cybersecurity seriously now, which is great news. We've seen a huge growth in our cybersecurity business in the last 12 months, and we expect to see a huge growth again. This is because cybersecurity expertise is particularly expensive and not something that's easy to bring in into your own business. So obviously, naturally, reaching out to your IT provider, to your MSP, hopefully us, to talk about cybersecurity and leveraging our internal cybersecurity experts and our engineers and our SOC team will be cheaper than you buying a cybersecurity engineer, hopefully. So, but also that last piece and a bit of an action for you is cyber resilience planning, all right? Or having a plan, basically having a plan. What happens when you are in breach or a malicious actor has managed to get into your network? Like, do you know what you got to do? Do you know how to do it? Do you know who you've got to tell? Do you know how quickly you have to tell them so you don't get fined? Things like that. If you don't know the answers to that, then definitely engage with your IT provider and build yourself a cyber response plan or a cyber resilience plan. Right? So urgent actions around cybersecurity, EDR, XDR, MDR. So effectively, just to go through that, EDR is endpoint detection response. It happens on your desktop. All right, it's like better antivirus. Absolute must get it done. XDR is all about your cloud, okay, and interrogating that extended level beyond just the endpoint. What's going on in the cloud? What's going on with switching? What's going on with other peripherals outside of the endpoint? MDR stands for managed detection and response. That's actually a human being reacting to an issue, right? They're going to determine that something weird's going on in your system, and they will shut that down and they will stop it from happening, all right? And that's the bit that AI is disrupting. It's not quite there yet, but it is disrupting that piece, all right? Phishing awareness, I mentioned that. Make sure you're teaching your staff to not click on links, and cyber resilience planning, right? Get a plan together. So, very quickly then, NASP couple of bits. Microsoft, right? Just Microsoft's dominance never ends. They keep innovating, creating new technologies, and they will continue to do that in the next 12 months. They will continue to come up with new technologies and new platforms and new tools. We talked about a few of them, Power Automate, okay. But we obviously, there are loads. There is a list there in the background. If you don't know what any of those or some of those things are, and you have a Microsoft license of some sort, you are paying for those things, okay. If you're not using them, then have a look at your solution and say, another option there to cut costs is like, well, we're paying all this money for a project management system, but actually you've got projects inside your 365 environment. Can you utilize that? Can you save yourself some costs somewhere? Power BI, data visualization, Power Automate, OneNote, digital note taking, Loop components, connections, all sorts of things in there, right? We do a webinar series called Tips and Tricks. Within that, kind of every month I do a webinar and I show you some of these technologies and some of these products and services and how to use them, with some examples of how to do them. So we've got another one on Thursday, the 27th of February, by looks things. So talking about teams, edge and projects. And that'll be kind of how to get the most out of some of these platforms. So there's also a whole raft of ones that we've done in the past. So again, go to the website, go and have a look at those. And you might get some ideas of some of the things that you can do here, like lists, for example, massively underused, really, really powerful. So I encourage you to go and look at that. But Microsoft will continue to innovate. What's going to happen in the next 12 months is all of these products are going to get a co-pilot next to them to some extent. Maybe not all. I'm being maybe a bit bold there, but all the big ones, all right, are going to have some sort of co-pilot assistant baked into them, like Project already has. I can go in there and ask it to create me a project plan around something, and it will just spit me out a project plan. Awesome stuff. Doesn't mean it's right, but it gets me started, all right. Probably one of the big ones that we see going rapidly at the moment. You may have already heard of this, and it was a conversation that's been had last year. I think this will happen even more this year. Is Power BI, especially in the climate where we're looking at cutting costs. In order to work out where to cut costs, we need to look at our processes, we need to look at data, we need to understand our data, we need factual evidence so that we can work out how to be more efficient or more or tighten the belt or whatever we might need to do as a business. So Power BI, key thing really with Power BI is that it's a platform to grab your data, whether that's spreadsheets and all sorts of bits we do today, and visualize that in a much richer way. It integrates seamlessly into the Microsoft Office suite. It allows me to export my data to BI. It allows me to import my spreadsheet into Power BI. It allows me to grab data from things like the Microsoft Graph, if any of you are aware of what that is, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's baked into my existing work world, shall we say. This interface is very similar to using any other Microsoft product, toolbar at the top. It's all very familiar. But the other key thing is that, if I need some data, I'm asking somebody in my team to get me that data, then I might be waiting a month for it. Now, the nice thing about Power BI is that all that data is live. It's always live, right? It's grabbing the data on the fly, potentially. So, this is an example of a Power BI dashboard, if you've never seen one. And what we've got here is just a bunch of data, not our data, I'd like to point out, but this is sales information across a territory, so being the United States, hopefully, that you can recognize there. So, and what it's saying here is that we're selling these devices, and I want to do some forecasting, and I'm going to scale these numbers up and down, and I'm going to predict how many devices we're like to sell in a certain territory at a certain time. And all of this is going to require information from probably different sources, right? It's going to come from the sales platform, from the finance platform, from the operational team. The problem is I can't run a report in I can't run a report in Salesforce. I'm going to pull that out and I'm going to end up with a spreadsheet. I'm going to report in the finance system, pull that out, I'm going to have a spreadsheet. I'm going to run a report in the operations team, I'm going to have a spreadsheet. Now I've got 3 spreadsheets, and now I need a human being to sit there and put that all together and create me a graph that gives me a response. That's going to take a week, 2 weeks. Well, I ask for some data because I need to make a key decision for our business as quickly as possible because we're looking to be agile. And now I've got to wait 2 weeks. That isn't ideal. Okay, so finding a way to do that by drawing that live data into those platforms seamlessly means that I can go and look at this dashboard whenever I want, and I can see those trends as they're happening, not a week or 2 weeks later. I can identify issues and react and change in a much more efficient way. Not to say, I guess the other key thing to add as well if anybody's looking at investment or private equity or anything like that, then obviously this sort of level of data and detail is key. Giving your PE house clear, concise data, a pack of data is a fundamental part of any of those relationships. And being able to do that and have visibility like this inside your data, inside your business, could be the result, or could result in a whole other multiple in the value of your business. So it's key to be able to generate this kind of stuff. And we're seeing loads and loads and loads of this and loads of conversations, not just at a business level, it might just be at departmental level or sub-region level or territory level, whatever it looks like. But BI is going to grow in the next few months. The one we don't want to leave out is telephones. All right, we've all used telephones for many, many years. I'm old enough to remember not having a telephone, but obviously now it's just very much part of what we do. Most people have got phones, although that industry, in all fairness, is starting to reduce. Okay, and the reason that the telephone industry is starting to reduce and the connectivity industry is starting to reduce a little bit is because of the disruptors in the field and how technology is moving on. So one thing I want to say though is with a phone is not just a phone. All right, we think of a telephone, we pick a phone up and we're going to talk to somebody, we're going to put the phone back down again, right? But actually, it's a communication channel, it's a collaboration channel. Now, we use the term collaboration a lot in the world of IT. And this is one of the things that I want to try and stress is that your phone system, you may not realize it, but it's probably got a load of bells and whistles behind there that you don't realize it has. And if you're not making use of them, you might be missing a trick there. So lots of phone systems will have on-hold music. I've listed a few things here, right? Like on-hold music. They have the ability to route calls around different people in hunt groups and ringing hunt groups and things. Some telephone systems will allow you to transcribe what's being said on a call. Now, if you can transcribe that information live on a call, then think about the benefits of that. Certainly in like sales training or something. You've got somebody making a call, and they're having a conversation, and then you can see the response, and that's being transcribed out. And the sales manager sat at the side going, "Okay, I'll advise you, make a tweak on this, make a change on that." Maybe it's not a sales manager. Maybe it's an AI engine saying, "Actually, do you know what? Bob said this, and it worked really, really well. So how about you suggest you doing that?" Lots of things that you can plug into these sorts of these technologies, but transcribing is key. On hold, on hold kind of marketing and pushing information out to a customer whilst they're waiting to get through to you. Callbacks and queues, all those sorts of things, and a key thing being support. Right, you need to make sure you support around telephone systems. Key. If you're, if you're, maybe you can live. Somebody once told me, I can live with the emails going down, I can live with the server going down, I can live with the internet going down, right? But I can't live with the phone going down because I can lose all of that. And my business will keep running because I can pick a phone up and I can speak to my customers. If I lose all of it, then I'm in trouble. So think about how important telephony still is to you, all right? So the last thing we're going to talk about is just a couple of predictions, all right? These are these big buzzword things that we've talked about, or you may have heard the term in the last year or two, IoT, the Internet of Things. So it's very much happening. All right, but what's interesting about the Internet of Things is you probably don't even see it, right? You might see it. You might have Philips smart bulbs at home, and you've got Alexas in your house, and maybe in the next month you're going to buy a fridge that's connected to the internet and orders you food and all that sort of stuff, right? But that's probably what we think is from a consumer level about IoT. But IoT is baked into a lot of things. It is in your car, okay? It is in your door entry system, probably, right? These things are what we mean by IoT are small electronic devices that are connected to a back-end bigger network permanently. And they might connect there via 5G, for example, to make them wireless, but they're constantly gathering telematic information, feeding it back to a bigger system that's making informed decisions about the information. So it's the Internet of Things. In other words, it's not PCs we're talking about. We're talking about little devices, your phone, your kettle, whatever it looks like. Now, that's happening. Of course, it's happening. How much is that revolutionizing our industry in the SMB sector? Unless you're working in that sector, probably not a lot, is the truth. Is there any great IoT innovation there at the moment that's going to rapidly change every single SMB in the world? Possibly not, is the truth. And I'm probably I'm willing to be wrong. I'm willing for you to all tell me that I'm massively missing something at that point. But we will adopt those products maybe as we need them. But there's nothing that I can't think of an IoT device that I could bring into the business going to transform anything in a way that AI could, for example. 5G, that's already made a big improvement. We see lots of businesses that are using 5G rather than their fixed lines, so for their internet. It's become more standard. If you go to the big kind of Vodafones and people like that, you can get 5G home broadband. It's much more stable now. It's much more reliable. What will really disrupt is when 6G happens. That's already rolling out in certain parts of the world. 6G is going to blow the socks off of everything. Okay, and that will come to the UK in time. It will mean that we probably have much less dependency on internet lines and lease lines and fibre to premise and that sort of stuff. There are reasons why BT are buying the big mobile operators, because they know their days are doomed around the connectivity. But it will be there for a while, don't get me wrong. But 5G and 6G will come in. It will question why we need wireless. It will question why we need internet lines. Okay, so bear that in mind in the future as you start to think about your strategy over the next 5 years. At some point in the next 5 years, I'd expect us to see 6G and people just walking around with devices or are always permanently connected to the work network. Cloud environments, SMEs, we're looking to introduce more local storage. Hyperscalers are brilliant. What I mean by that is the Amazons, the Microsoft Azures. We're moving our technology into the cloud. We've absolutely done that. This always happens on a site for every 10 years or so. It goes up to a big kind of data center mainframe. We probably would have called it back in the 80s. We had thin terminals and big mainframes, and then we flipped that and we had big PCs and not much going on the server. And now we flipped it again and we're now putting it all in the cloud and we've got more powerful PCs again. So that will happen. And what will happen is it will reverse around again in the next few years. I imagine we will see, because of the cost of the hyperscalers, because of governance issues, because of the fact that they're just getting hammered by cybersecurity issues. It's still I'm not saying they're not a safe place, they really are, but we need to make sure that we don't make the mistake of letting bad people into it. Probably the key point is that cost element. It is scaling. It is getting more expensive. Okay, this stuff, the world's getting more expensive. Therefore, it's getting more expensive. The ability to manage a fixed cost is difficult in a public cloud, and people are looking at their costs right now. So we predict that will come. Some of this stuff will come back local. You'll be in a hybrid environment where things that need to scale quickly in your business are in the cloud, and things that don't may come back on premise. Although I'm not sure which way that's going to go at the moment. Big data. The last point really is big data. It's a term that's been bandied around. People talk to me about it all the time. What we mean by big data is gathering everything we know about your business. So basically Power BI is what we were talking about, and automation and process mining. A few years ago, we would have needed SQL analysts, big data people, a team of those people to come in and churn through your data and write scripts and applications to analyze your data. The truth is that that's probably dwindling down a bit now. The concept of big data isn't going anywhere. Looking at all your data and making decisions, key informed decisions that improve your business process, that isn't going anywhere. But there's a new player in town with that, and that is AI. AI has the ability to interrogate your data probably way more efficiently than any big data scientist is going to do. So that's shifted, shall we say. So with that, I think you've had enough of me, and we're about an hour in, aren't we? So I think if anyone's got any questions, feel free to fire the questions in, and I will answer. So how do you use Copilot in a physical meeting as opposed to a virtual one? It's a great question. Get asked all the time. Right. So in a nutshell, there are Copilot apps on your phone. All right, that's one option. So if you're in a physical meeting, you can actually go and log into the Copilot app on your phone, put it on record, have a conversation, and it will record it. It is, to some degree, intelligent enough to work out if different people are talking, but I know exactly where you're headed with this question. What happens is it thinks you're saying everything. So it doesn't, this idea of somebody saying, hey, Scott, I want you to do X, Y, and Z, doesn't happen when you've got 6 people in one room and one person on a Teams call, because it doesn't have a clue who just said that, right? So it won't say that, I'll pick on Sam because he's sat in a room with me, but it won't say Sam said to Scott that he needs to do X, Y, and Z. It will just say Scott was given an action to do this. Okay, so so it kind of does work as long as you can record your voice in some capacity, or you're willing to have a conversation with somebody. You do need to tell that person that you're sat in a room with physically that you're going to record it. That is worth saying. Otherwise, you might get in a bit of hot water. But you can record the call using Copilot and have that conversation, right? Next question: where do you think companies like Starlink will fit into business connectivity against 5G and fiber connectivity? Yeah, so another great example, right? So Starlink is has always been quite pioneering, right? Elon's, whether you like him or hate him, Elon is changing lots of things and changing the world to some degree. So Starlink is probably up there in my recommendations on difficult locations to get connectivity to. Okay, its speed is really good. What it falls down on is it's slightly more latent than a line, and what we mean by latency is the time it takes for a piece of data to leave your PC, go up into space, come back down again into a data center somewhere else in the world, and go back up into space, and then come back down to your PC. Now, this happens in milliseconds, but anything over about 25 milliseconds in certain environments, like remote desktop environments, means that you'll start to see lag, and you start to see delay, and you start to see performance issues, right? If you're just browsing the internet and saving a Word document, it'll be fine. You'll never even see it. If you're doing anything in real time or live, then you're probably going to feel a bit of pain. So, so there are some arguments to say that it's the right technology in the right place. If you're in a really rural location, it's great. It's not so great when you've got loads of trees all over the place and cloud cover and connectivity issues. It does require some consideration when, if your business is not the owner of the building you're in, then you need to go to your landlord and check you're allowed to mount this stuff on the roof. So in the retail world, obviously, you've got considerations around your franchisees maybe and what they're going to do, and whether or not the occupant of the retail store is allowed to screw a Starlink into the roof. So so there are challenges, but genuinely, it's up there. It is an absolutely viable alternative to some of this stuff. But it's just about, I guess the other point is what happens if it breaks? You probably still need a backup line. I'd argue today that if your business is really utterly dependent on connectivity, you want something like a lease line with a backup option, and that could be 5G, it could be satellite, or could be Starlink. I'll put that in the same boundary. It might be a lower level fiber to the premise line, but you've got lots of options around what you can do with connectivity. Starlink is an absolutely valid one. Okay. Any more questions, anybody? Excellent. Well, look, I know a lot of you are have my contact details anyway. As always, feel free to email me and ask a question. But if there's no further questions, I hope you found that useful. I hope that, look, I'm not saying everything I've said today is correct and right. It's just my opinion. You might disagree with me. But if there's anything else you want to know about emerging tech or emerging trends, then I hope you do reach out to us, reach out to myself or account managers or anybody else in the TaylorMade team. Hopefully you found it interesting and useful. All the best. Thank you very much. See you again soon. Take care.